Shalom. Today is 23rd of January. Just want to share a few thoughts based on my studies this morning. So I've been reading in James where it talks about that we are born of Yahweh and we are the first fruits of His creation. And it's in relation to the word of Yahweh. So that whole idea has got three main concepts. The concept of being born of Yahweh, that's also the concept of what it means to be born again. So we're going to explore that a bit. And then there's also the term that is used, first fruits, so the idea of fruit, within relation to the creation. And then there is the word of Yahweh. So we can only become the first fruits if we interact with the word. And that whole idea comes from Yahweh. And we are actually born of Yahweh through that process. Now, taking one step back, just thinking about the first fruits or the concept of a fruit. Now, we know that fruit you find on a tree. And everything in Scripture that has to do with the spiritual is explained through symbolism and within agricultural terms. And the reason being is when Yahweh created, He laid the foundation of His creation. So if you want to find the root or the deepest meaning of something that is hidden, which is normally the spiritual, you have to go back to the foundational truth. So the layers of foundation that was laid within the creation process are explained through the days of creation. So Yahweh created light. Let there be light. I more think that He released light, He expressed light, because light comes from Him. So it's not a created entity, it's a revealed entity. Let there be light. And then Yahweh separated the waters from the waters. So we have the idea of water. We also have the idea of Yahweh speaking. Let there be light, and so forth. So commanding what needs to happen is through the medium of words. Now, if you read through Scripture, you get the symbolism of the words relating to water, or the word of Yahweh relating to water, which has a cleansing attribute. It also has an attribute that sustains life. So water, you get waters below, and you get waters above. You get revealed water or revealed word that is that we have access to, which is the waters below, and we have waters above, which is the revelation of the unknown, which is still to be revealed. And then Yahweh separated the water from the land. So the earth, Eretz, or the ground, is the foundation to sustain all physical life, which is plants and animals, and grass and trees and all that. And that is the foundation of what we're going to look into, because a tree bears fruit, and the tree needs ground, the tree needs water, and the tree needs light. So all the things are there to sustain life, and the product of that life is expressed through fruit. Now, James used this analogy concept of those fundamental foundational things that you also find in creation, and which is one of the words that he's using. So if we look at that verse in context of creation and all the foundational things, we can delve into the spiritual depths and the spiritual truth that is not seen. So we access the waters above, or the revelation of the unseen, or the revelation of everything that is beyond us, which is in the spiritual realm. Within the fruit that is the product of this life, that comes from a tree, you find a seed, and the seed contains everything. It's like the DNA of the fruit that will reproduce another tree and then more fruit can be produced, and multiplication can take place. Reproduction, which is the concept of birth, to be born. So we see that same concept used in the language that James is using. It is birthed or born of Yahweh. It comes from him, but through the mechanisms of these foundational ideas or concepts or technologies or systems that he placed in order to sustain this life and then reproduce life and multiply life. So the end product of fruit can then be multiplied, and that is the reason of all that is being created, is the fruit. Now, the concept of first fruit means that it's the first of the fruit that has the ability to produce more fruit, but through the seed and creating more trees. Now, I think it's one of the Psalms, I can't remember which Psalm it is, that it referred to man as a tree. So we are like trees of the fields that clap their hands. And we also get that idea in the Garden of Eden with the two trees. Now, we had the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Now, those two trees represent man. Man in the physical state, which is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's where we are currently, which is our current state. That's our greatest state in a fallen scenario. And then the tree of life is the elevated state of man, of which where we need to aspire to. So how do we get from the lower state to the higher state? Now, when Adam and Chava ate off the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they actually kept themselves busy with their current state, with a lower state, dealing with things that already exist within them. And Yahweh wanted to elevate them. He wanted them to eat from the fruit that is beyond, the fruit that comes from above, the fruit that allows that additional elevation and revelation of the unseen waters, of the unseen realm where he is. So he encouraged us to eat from the tree of life, not from the tree of knowledge, for that very reason. And that was also just a little nuance on the reason for that sin, and why Yahweh don't want us to eat from the tree of knowledge. He wants us to access the tree of life for that very reason. So, coming back to the fruit. So you are a tree that is planted in the garden. And if you read Psalm 1, you'll see that the tree need to be planted by living waters. The water is symbolism of the word. And that will then bring forth fruit. So you have the ability to birth something, to bring something into existence. Another word for birth in Hebrew is yada, yod, yalat, yod lamed dalet, and that means to labor, to birth, to be born. It's the verb for the action that brings new life into existence. Now you'll see that one of the words or one of the meanings of yalat is labor. So through the labor, which is also what James alluded to previously, is faith without works, faith without labor is dead. Faith without this birth process is dead. Faith without bringing forth life is dead. Faith without fruit is dead. Faith without fruit that can reproduce more trees, that can produce more fruit, is dead. And that is the context in which we need to look at this in order to understand what James was actually talking about. So we have the seed that is incorruptible, the incorruptible seed. That is how Peter explains it. And through that seed, we are born again. So you need to have access to the seed. And when we read the parable of the sower, we see that the seed also refers to the word. Now we have the water and we have seed that represents Yahweh's word. And both contains the DNA and the essence of what the tree should be. Now if you look at the DNA of a human, the DNA determine what the human will be like, what eye color they will have, their build, their height. So everything is contained within that. In the same way, everything that can regenerate your DNA to move you from a tree of knowledge version to the tree of life version of man, the small Adam to the larger Adam, the elevated Adam, is found within the DNA or within the seed that is within the fruit that is carried by trees. Now these trees are trees that transformed from the tree of life, after the tree of knowledge, into the tree of life. And the fruit of the tree of life has the ability to transform the tree of knowledge state into the tree of life state. That's that regeneration process that will take place. Now when you look at the normal incubation process of conception, where the sperm and the egg meet, and then the growth within the mother, the Chava, the life giver, and then the birth process, which brings forth new life that look like the mother and the father, the combination of the two. That whole idea is also found within the concept of the seed. So the sperm that incubate the egg is the word that incubate man, so that man can be transformed and rebirthed, reborn into that elevated state, or that tree of life that now bear the fruit that contain this very seed that another person needs in order to undergo the same process. So we get the same idea of multiplication. So the key is the seed. He calls it the uncorruptible seed, or the uncorruptible word of Yahweh. Now in the context of Peter's letter, he referred to the Tanakh, because the word is not referring to the New Testament at all in this context. And within the Tanakh, you get the Torah, you get the prophets, and you get the writings. And within that is the key of this new life. But when you read the scripture in John 3, it talks about that you need to be born of water and the Spirit. So now the Spirit is part of this equation. So it's not only the word, it's not only the water or the word or the seed that you need. You need the Spirit of Yahweh to be the energy that regenerates you. It's only through His power that utilizes the word inside of you that regenerate a new nature within you. So you need both. And how do I know what the nature is? The nature is written in the Tanakh. The nature is the nature of Yahweh, which is predominantly contained within His commandments. Because every commandment that He gave us is something that He does. Because the Torah is the knowledge of sin. Yahweh does not have any sin. That means that He complies with every single commandment within the Torah, i.e. His nature. So how do I know what the Father is like? Read the commandments and you'll know Him better. Study the commandments and you'll know His nature. Yeshua complied with all the commandments because it was stated that He was sinless. So He did the Torah 100%. Is it possible for us to do? No. Because we are still in a fallen state. We need that final elevation to take place. But you are in a process of elevation through this rebirth process. But as you know, when you are born as a little baby, you first have to crawl, then you learn to walk, and then you can run, and then you become mature. And only in a mature state you have the ability to reproduce. So it's a process. Some of you are still in the infant state. Some of you are in a toddler state. Some of you are in a young woman or young man state. Some of you are in a mature state that can reproduce. And that is the process that needs to happen within the body of Mashiach, or the family of Yahweh, where we have a safe environment that cultivates the nature of Yahweh and the love and peace and acceptance within that environment to help us to grow up and also allow us to make mistakes, but encourages us not to make those mistakes again as we learn to walk, as we learn to run. And that's where grace comes in. Grace is not the net you can lie on, because the trapeze artist didn't catch you and you fell into the net. It's there to save your life. But you need to get back up again, to practice again, to be perfect. And that's the other concept we looked at in James, to become perfect. Perfection is one of the outcomes or the goals that Yahweh wants. And that perfection is in line with maturity, and maturity has the ability to reproduce and carry the seed and have the ability to reproduce itself, which is another tree of life, or the conversion from a tree of knowledge into the tree of life that will give us the access to the waters above. So that's just a thought of the day, something I've been contemplating and thinking about, studying the book of James, and so I hope you all have a lovely day. Shalom.